Captain Lee Minho walked slowly across the bridge of his ship Terra's Pride. The stars outside looked like tiny diamonds scattered on black cloth. He had been looking at the same view for 3 months now. His crew was tired and he could see it. In their faces, they had been mapping the outer space sectors for a long time, and nothing exciting had happened. The ship was not very big, but it was fast and strong. It had the best equipment that Earth could make. The crew of 45 people were some of the best that the human Space Force had to offer. They were explorers and scientists and soldiers all working together to find new worlds and new life in the galaxy. Communications Officer Park Soman sat at her station listening to the radio. Waves that came from deep space. Most of the time there was nothing but empty static, the sound of the universe breathing in silence. But today something was different. She had been hearing strange patterns in the noise for the past hour. Something that almost sounded like a voice. Minho watched her work. Park Soman was young, but she was very good at her job. She could hear things in the static that other people missed. She had found 3 new radio sources in the past month and helped the science team map 2 new star systems. Her black hair was tied back and she wore the blue uniform of the communications division. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines and the beeping of the computers. Chief Engineer Kim Dae-ho was checking the power systems. Navigation Officer Choi Ji-won was plotting their next jump to hyperspace. Security Chief Yoon Hana was reading reports from the other human ships in this part of space. Everything was normal and peaceful then. Park Soman suddenly sat up straight in her chair. Her face went white and her hands started shaking. She put her hand to her earpiece and listened very carefully to something that no one else could hear. The other crew members looked at her with worry. Something was wrong. Captain, what is it? Asked Kim Dae-ho from his station. He was a big man with kind eyes who had been working on spaceships for 20 years. He could tell when something bad was happening just by looking at people's faces. Park Soman looked at Captain Minho with wide eyes. Sir, I am picking up a distress signal, but it is not from any human ship. It is something else. Something alien. The bridge became very quiet. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at Park Soman. Alien signals were very rare. Humans had been exploring space for 50 years and they had only found signs of alien life 3 times before. None of those times had the aliens been trying to talk to anyone. Where is it coming from? Asked Minho. He felt his heart start beating faster. This could be the most important discovery in human history. The signal is coming from the Kepler 442 system, Park Soman said while she worked at her computer. The message is very weak and broken. There is a lot of static, but the universal translator is trying to make sense of it. Dr. Han Jiang, the ship's scientist, came over to listen. She was an expert in alien languages and cultures, even though she had never met a real alien before. She put on a headset and listened to the signal. Her face became very serious as she heard what was being transmitted. The message is in pieces, she said slowly, but I can understand some of it. There is a species calling themselves the Villani. They are under attack. Their worlds are burning. They are asking for help from anyone who can hear them. Kim Dae-ho frowned as he looked at his star charts. Sir, the Kepler 442 system is 12 light years away from here. Even if we use maximum hyperspace speed, it would take us 2 weeks to get there. Security Chief Yoon Hana stepped forward. Captain, we do not know anything about these Villani. This could be a trap. Pirates sometimes use fake distress signals to lure ships into ambush. We should be very careful. But Captain Minho was listening to the alien signal through his own headset. Even though the words were strange and the voice was not human, he could hear something in it that made his chest tight with emotion. It was the sound of pure terror, the same sound he had heard from human voices during the colony wars when the outer settlements were attacked by raiders. The alien voice was desperate and afraid. It was the sound of someone who knew they were about to die but still hoped that someone, somewhere might help them. It was the sound of parents trying to save their children. It was the sound of a whole species crying out for salvation. Dr. Han Jiang was working frantically at her computer, trying to clean up the signal and translate more of the message. Captain, I'm getting more pieces now. The Villani are saying that their children are being taken. Their cities are burning from orbit. Something is hunting them, something very bad. Navigation Officer Choi Ji-won pulled up a holographic map of the local star systems. The Kepler 442 system showed up as 3 small dots of light surrounded by the darkness of empty space. It was far away from any human colonies or trading routes. If something bad was happening there, no one would know about it. Chief Engineer Kim Dae-ho looked worried. Captain, our orders are to map the Tau Ceti region and report back to Earth Command in 6 weeks. If we go to this Kepler system, we will be late and we might get in trouble. Security Chief Yoon Hana nodded in agreement, and we do not know what kind of weapons these attackers have. Our ship is built for exploration, not for fighting. If we go there, we might not come back. But Captain Minho kept listening to the alien signal. The voice was getting weaker, which meant the transmitter was probably being destroyed, or the people sending it were dying. He thought about his own family back on Earth, his wife and his 2 young sons. What would he want someone to do if they were the ones crying for help? The Volani signal was not just asking for military help, they were asking for someone to remember them. They were asking for someone to know that they had existed and that they had tried to survive. They were asking for someone to care that they were dying alone in the dark. Park Soman looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. Captain, the signal is getting much weaker. I think we are losing them. Minho made his decision. We are going, he said firmly. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we are responding to a first contact distress call. We are going to help. The Valanicum Dae-ho started preparing the hyperspace engines. Choi Ji-won plotted a course to the Kepler 442 system. Yoon Hana checked the weapon systems. Even though they were not very strong, Dr. Han Jeong kept listening to the signal, trying to learn more about what they would find when they arrived. As the Terra's Pride jumped into hyperspace, Captain Minho stood on the bridge looking at the swirling colors of the hyperspace tunnel. He did not know that he was about to witness the beginning of the first galactic war in human history. He did not know that the Volani cry for help would echo across all of human space and change everything forever, but he knew that when someone called for help, you answered. That was what humans did. When Captain Lee Minho and his crew arrived at the Kepler 442 system, they found something that would give them nightmares for the rest of their lives. 3 beautiful planets that had once been green and blue like Earth were now burning orange and red. Massive black ships hung in the sky above them like giant metal spears, raining fire down on the surface. The Terra's Pride dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, and immediately all the alarms started going off. The ship's sensors were picking up radiation levels that were deadly to most forms of life. The atmosphere on all 3 planets was being poisoned by some kind of weapon that turned the air itself into acid. Dr. Han Jeong ran to her science station and started scanning the planets. Her face went pale as she read the results. Captain, the readings I am getting are horrible. Whatever those black ships are doing, they are not just attacking the planets. They are making them impossible to live on. The air is becoming toxic. The water is turning to poison. Even the soil is dying. Communications Officer Park Soman was trying to scan the radio frequencies coming from the planet's surface. She could hear voices crying and screaming in the alien language. The universal translator was working hard to make sense of the chaos, but the words it produced made everyone on the bridge feel sick. The black ships in orbit around the planets were unlike anything in the human database. They were huge, at least 3 times bigger than the biggest human battleship. Their hulls were covered in strange symbols that seemed to move and change when you looked at them directly. Each ship had dozens of weapon ports that were firing continuously at the surface below. Navigation Officer Choi Ji-won counted the enemy ships, and his voice shook when he reported the numbers. Captain, there are over 200 of those black ships in this system, and they are not alone. There are smaller ships moving between the planet's transport ships, carrying something. Security Chief Yoon Hana was studying the tactical display, trying to understand what they were seeing. The smaller ships were landing on the planet's surface and then taking off again loaded with cargo, but what kind of cargo could they be taking from a world that was being destroyed? Then one of the smaller enemy ships noticed the Terra's Pride. A group of 6 ships broke away from the main fleet and started moving toward the human vessel. They were fast, much faster than any human ship, and their approach was clearly hostile. Park Soman received a transmission from the approaching ships, and when she played it through the speakers, everyone on the bridge wished they had never heard it. The voice was cold and mechanical. Like a machine that had learned to speak, it spoke in perfect universal standard, which meant these aliens had encountered other spacefaring species before. We are the devourers, the voice said without any emotion. You will leave this system immediately. or you will be destroyed. The harvest of this world belongs to us. The prey species here are our property." Now Captain Minho felt his blood turn cold. Harvest prey species, these aliens were not just conquering the Villani, they were treating them like animals. Dr. Han Jiang was working frantically at her science station, trying to get more detailed scans of what was happening on the planet's surface. "Captain," she said with tears in her eyes, "I am reading life signs on the surface, millions of them. They are being gathered into large groups and loaded onto the transport ships. The Villani are being taken alive." The main display screen showed images from the planet's surface that made several crew members run to the bathroom to be sick. The Villani were gentle creatures that looked like a cross between deer and humans. They had soft fur, large intelligent eyes, and delicate hands. They walked on two legs like humans, but they were smaller and more graceful. The devourers were herding them like cattle, using energy weapons to force them into large camps. Families were being separated. Parents were being torn away from their children. The young and healthy Villani were being loaded onto transport ships, while the old and sick were simply left behind to die from the poisoned air. Chief Engineer Kim Dae-ho was monitoring the devourer ships, and what he found made the situation even worse. "Captain, these ships show signs of having done this before. Many times their hulls have scorch marks from dozens of different types of weapons. They have been to many other star systems." Han Jiang was analyzing the energy signatures from the devourer weapons, and her findings were terrifying. Based on these readings, they have been using the same tactics for a very long time. They poison the atmosphere to weaken the population, then they harvest the survivors. The ones they take are probably used for food or slave labor. Tactical Officer Bei Sunho, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "Up, Captain. We are outnumbered more than 50 to 1. Their ships are bigger and more heavily armed than anything we have. Our weapons might not even be able to damage their hulls." The 6 devourer ships were getting closer, and their weapons were powering up. The Terra's pride was fast, but it could not outrun 6 enemy ships, and it definitely could not fight them. The situation looked hopeless, but Captain Minho was not thinking about escape. He was thinking about the Villani families being torn apart. He was thinking about the children being loaded onto ships like cargo. He was thinking about an entire species being harvested like crops in a field. And he was thinking about all the other species that had probably sent out distress signals that no one had answered. The devourer ships were close enough now that their weapons could destroy the Terra's pride with one shot. The lead ship sent another transmission. "Your time is up. Human vessel, leave now or be destroyed." But instead of running, Captain Minho made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He turned to Communications Officer Park So-min and gave her an order that surprised everyone on the bridge. "Send a message to Earth Command," he said calmly. "Tell them what we have found here. Tell them the Villani need our help, and tell them we are going to give it to them." Park So-min stared at him in shock. "Sir, the Devourers will destroy us before the message even reaches Earth." "I know," Minho replied. "But Earth needs to know what is happening out here. They need to know that there are monsters in the galaxy that harvest entire species like crops. They need to know that somewhere right now there are innocent people crying for help." Dr. Han Jiang was still scanning the planet's surface, and she had found something that made her gasp. "Captain, I am detecting Villani children hidden in underground shelters. Their parents hid them before the harvest began. There are thousands of them down there waiting for someone to save them." Yoon Hana looked at the tactical display showing the approaching devourer ships. "Sir, we cannot fight them. We cannot save anyone if we are dead." Minho looked around at his crew and saw fear in their eyes, but he also saw something else. He saw the same determination that had driven humans to explore the galaxy in the first place, the same stubborn refusal to give up that had helped humanity survive wars and disasters and the long journey to the stars. "Maybe we cannot save them all," he said quietly, "but we can try, and we can make sure that Earth knows what happened here. We can make sure that the Villani are not forgotten." The message to Earth Command was sent just as the first devourer ship opened fire. Admiral Oh Min-yong sat in the war room, deep under the Seoul military complex, staring at the holographic display that showed Captain Minho's final transmission. The images from the Villani system played over and over again, showing the burning worlds and the harvest ships and the desperate families being torn apart. Around the conference table sat the most powerful people in human space: General Nam Woojin, who commanded all the ground forces, Defense Minister Kwon Tae-young, who controlled the Military Budget Intelligence Director Song Hae-jin, who knew all the secrets, and Fleet Admiral Jang Kyung-ho, who was responsible for every human warship in the galaxy for 3 hours. They had watched the footage in complete silence. The room was filled with the sound of alien screams and the mechanical voices of the Devourers. The universal translator kept repeating the same horrible words. Harvest prey species property. The words burned into their minds like acid. General Nam Woo-jin was the first person to speak, and his voice was shaking with anger. 50 billion Villani. That is their entire population being processed like animals in a slaughterhouse. The Devourers are not even trying to hide what they are doing. They are proud of it. Intelligence Director Song Hae-jin had been analyzing all the data from Captain Minho's ship. Her findings were even worse than what they had seen in the first transmission. The Devourers have done this to at least 12 other species in this part of the galaxy. Our analysis shows they have been moving through space for hundreds of years, destroying every intelligent life form they encounter. Defense Minister Kwon Tae-young leaned forward in his chair. The question is, what can we do about it? Humanity has never fought a war on this scale. We are talking about an enemy that controls multiple star systems and has weapons we do not understand. Admiral O was studying something else in the report, something that made her blood run cold. The Villani had managed to send one final message before their transmitters were destroyed. It was not just a cry for help, it was a warning. The message showed star charts and movement patterns and a list of other species that had been harvested. She stood up and activated the main display screen, showing a map of the local galaxy. The red dots showed where Devourer fleets had been spotted. The blue dots showed human colonies and trading posts. When she connected the dots with lines showing the Devourer movement patterns, everyone in the room went silent. They are not just threatening the Villani, she said quietly. They are moving toward the galactic core, toward the most populated regions of space. Look at their path. They are heading directly for our colonies. The room erupted in urgent conversation as military leaders started calculating distances and fleet positions. But Admiral O raised her hand for silence. She was thinking about something her grandfather had told her when she was a little girl. He had been a soldier in the last Earth War, and he had said something that she never forgot. When you see a bully hurting someone, you have two choices. You can walk away and hope they do not come for you next, or you can stand up and fight even if you are scared, even if you might lose. You fight because that is what makes you human. Fleet Admiral Jang Kyung-ho was already pulling up fleet deployment charts. Sir, we have 200 ships scattered across 15 star systems. It would take weeks to gather them all in one place, and we still do not know how effective our weapons will be against Devourer technology. But Admiral O was not thinking about numbers or weapons or tactical advantages. She was thinking about the Villani children hiding in underground shelters, waiting for parents who would never come home. She was thinking about Captain Minho and his crew who had died trying to help strangers. She was thinking about what humanity stood for. She looked around the table at the faces of the people who would decide the fate of the human species. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes, but she could also see something else, the same stubborn determination that had carried humanity from caves to the stars. Gentlemen, ladies, she said in a voice that was steady and calm, we are going to war. The room fell silent. Defense Minister Kwon cleared his throat. Admiral, with respect, we need to think about this carefully. The Devourers have superior numbers and technology. If we attack them, we might be starting a war we cannot win. Oh, turned to face him directly. Minister, what happens if we do nothing? What happens when the Devourers finish harvesting the Villani and move on to the next species and the next one after that? What happens when they reach our colonies? General Nam Woo-jin nodded grimly. She is right. If we wait for them to come to us, we will be fighting on our own territory with our own people as targets. Better to fight them now, while we still have the element of surprise intelligence. Director Song Hae-jin was already working on her computer, pulling up files on other alien species in the region. There are 17 known intelligent species in the Devourer path of advance. If we can warn them, if we can get them to work together, we might have a chance. Within 6 hours, every shipyard in human space received emergency mobilization orders. The colonial fleet, which protected the outer settlements, the home defense force, which guarded Earth itself, even the merchant marine cargo Haulers and passenger liners were called into service. Captain Jang Kyung-ho found himself promoted to Fleet Admiral and put in command of the largest human military force ever assembled. 300 warships from destroyers to battleships, all armed with the newest weapons technology that human science could produce. The fleet gathered at the staging area near Jupiter while engineers worked around the clock to install new armor plating and more powerful weapons. Every ship was loaded with extra ammunition and medical supplies and emergency rations. The crews worked without sleep, driven by the knowledge that somewhere across the galaxy people were dying. Admiral O sent personal messages to the families of every crew member explaining why their sons and daughters and husbands and wives were going to fight. She told them about the Villani children and the harvest ships and the choice that humanity faced. Some people back on Earth protested the war. They said it was not humanity's responsibility to police the galaxy. They said the risk was too great and the cost too high, but most people supported the decision. When the news broadcasts showed the footage from the Villani system, public opinion changed quickly. Young people lined up at recruiting stations wanting to join the fight. Old veterans came out of retirement to serve on the ships. Factories that had been making civilian products switched to military production. Everyone wanted to help in some way as the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. Admiral O recorded a message for Captain Minho, even though she knew he was probably dead. "Hold on, Captain," she said, looking directly into the camera. "The cavalry is coming, and we are bringing everything we have." Got the jump to hyperspace would take 12 days. Each day felt like a year as the crews prepared for what they knew would be the biggest battle in human history. They trained on the weapon systems. They studied everything they knew about Devour technology. They wrote letters home that they hoped they would never have to send on the final day before they reached the Villani system. Admiral Jang stood on the bridge of his flagship, the battleship Indomitable, looking out at the 300 ships under his command. Each one carried hundreds of human lives. Each one represented humanity's determination to stand up to the monsters in the galaxy. His communications officer, Lieutenant Shin Yuna, was monitoring all the fleet frequencies. The crews were ready, sir, she reported. They know what they are fighting for, Admiral. Jang nodded as he watched the swirling colors of hyperspace outside the windows. In a few hours, they would drop back into normal space and face an enemy that had been harvesting worlds for centuries. They would be outnumbered and outgunned, but they would not be alone somewhere in the Villani system. If any of them were still alive, the survivors would know that someone had heard their cry for help, someone had answered their call for deliverance, and that someone was coming with fire. The Devourer fleet was finishing its harvest when 300 human warships appeared out of hyperspace like angry ghosts materializing from the void. The ships dropped into formation with military precision, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor, plating, and newly installed weapon systems that had never been tested in real combat. Fleet Admiral Jang Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the battleship Indomitable, watching the alien harvest fleet through the main tactical display. The Devourers had grown careless after centuries of easy conquests. Their ships were spread out across the system, focused on loading the last groups of Villani prisoners onto their transport vessels. Lieutenant Shin Yuna, the communications officer, was trying to establish contact with the Devourer command ship. The response came quickly in the same cold, mechanical voice that had threatened. "Captain Minho, weeks before we are the Devourers, you will leave this system immediately. The harvest is nearly complete. Your interference is not welcome." Admiral Jang took the microphone himself. His response was simple and direct, and it carried the weight of all human history behind it. "We are here because someone asked us to come, and we do not abandon people who need our help." The Devourers had ruled this part of the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what real resistance looked like. Most species they encountered either surrendered immediately when they saw the size of the harvest fleet or fought brief, hopeless battles before giving up. The Devourers expected these new aliens to do the same thing. They were very wrong about humanity. Captain Kim Suho of the destroyer Lightning Strike fired the first shot of the war. His ship's railgun volley punched through a Devourer cruiser's energy shields like they were made of paper. The alien ship spun out of control, trailing atmosphere and debris before crashing into the surface of Villani Prime. Within seconds, the entire human fleet opened fire. The space around the three Villani worlds lit up with the flash of energy weapons and the streaks of missile trails. The sound was impossible in the vacuum of space, but every human crew member could feel the vibrations through their ship's hull. As hundreds of weapons fired at once, the Devourers had never seen anything like human tactical doctrine. Most species fought in neat formations, following predictable patterns, but humans fought like a pack of wolves, each ship supporting the others, but also acting independently when they saw an opportunity. Captain Park Ji-won of the cruiser Seoul's Hammer found himself facing three Devourer battleships at once. His ship was outgunned and taking heavy damage, but when his main engines were destroyed and his weapons were failing, he made a decision that shocked both fleets. All hands brace for ramming speed, he announced over the ship's intercom. We are going to take one of them with us. The Seoul's Hammer accelerated on its emergency thrusters directly toward the largest Devourer ship. The alien vessel tried to move out of the way, but it was too big and too slow. The impact destroyed both ships in a massive explosion that lit up the entire system like a new star. Major Yu Seung-jae led his fighter squadron through the chaos of the main battle, heading for the transport ships that were still loaded with Villani prisoners. His small ships were fast and maneuverable enough to dodge the heavy weapons of the Devourer capital ships, but they were also fragile. "This is Red Squadron," he called over the radio as laser fire streaked past his cockpit. "We are going after the transports. No alien gets left behind today, boys. Let's show these harvesters what happens when they mess with the innocent." The fighter attack was suicide. The transport ships were defended by escort vessels with weapons designed to destroy small, fast targets, but the human pilots pressed their attack anyway, diving through walls of enemy fire to reach their targets. Yu Seung-jae himself managed to cripple three transport ships before his fighter was hit by a Devourer beam weapon. His last transmission was heard across the entire fleet. "Tell my wife I kept my promise. Tell her I made a difference." The battle raged for 18 hours as both fleets maneuvered around the three Villani worlds. Human ships used tactics that the Devourers had never encountered before. Coordinated swarm attacks where dozens of small ships would overwhelm a single large target. Ramming attacks by damaged vessels that could no longer fight effectively. Desperate boarding actions led by Marines. Empowered Armor Sergeant First Class Lee Dong-hae led one of those boarding parties onto a Devourer command ship. His squad of 20 Marines had to fight their way through corridors filled with automated defense systems and alien soldiers that looked like living nightmares, but they reached the ship's bridge and planted explosives that tore the vessel apart from the inside. The Devourers fought back with weapons that turned space itself into a weapon. Energy beams that could slice a battleship in half. Gravity manipulators that crushed human vessels like tin can. Swarms of automated fighters that moved like schools of metal fish, but for every human ship that was destroyed, the crew made sure to take at least one Devourer vessel with them. The human fleet was smaller and less advanced, but they fought with a savage fury that the Devourers had never experienced. Before Captain Lee Sang of the battleship Defiant Hope found his ship surrounded by 5 Devourer cruisers, his weapons were destroyed, his shields were down, and his hull was breached in a dozen places. But he still had one option left: engineering. He called over the intercom. "Overload the main reactor, set it to explode in 60 seconds. His chief engineer Park Miseo understood immediately. "Sir, that will destroy everything within 10 kilometers, including us." "That is the point," Captain Lee replied calmly. "We cannot let these monsters continue their harvest." The Defiant Hope exploded like a miniature sun, vaporizing itself in 3 Devourer ships. The shockwave damaged 2 more enemy vessels and created a gap in their battle line that other human ships immediately exploited. As the battle continued, the Devourers began to realize that they were not fighting a normal species. These humans did not retreat when they were outnumbered. They did not surrender when their situation was hopeless. They fought harder when things looked darkest, as if the certainty of death made them stronger instead of weaker. Admiral Jang watched the battle from his command bridge, keeping track of the ships under his command. Each loss was like a knife in his heart, but he could see that the sacrifice was not in vain. The Devourer fleet was taking damage faster than they could repair it. Lieutenant Shin Yuno was monitoring enemy communications, and what she heard made her smile. "Sir, the Devourers are calling for reinforcements. They are requesting immediate assistance from their core fleets. They are scared the battle finally ended when the last Devourer capital ship tried to retreat into hyperspace. Captain Won Jae-hoon of the destroyer Relentless pursued the fleeing vessel and destroyed its hyperspace engines with a precision missile strike. The alien ship was stranded and quickly overwhelmed by human fighters. When the shooting stopped, Admiral Jang looked around at what remained of his fleet. Nearly half the human ships were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Thousands of Earth's finest soldiers and sailors floated dead in the void between the stars. The cost had been terrible, but the Devourer Harvest fleet was in ruins. Their transport ships were empty, the Villani prisoners either freed or evacuated to safety. The 3 Villani worlds below were still poisoned and dying, but at least no more of their people would be taken. Communications. Officer Shin Yuna received a transmission. From the planet's surface, it was weak and filled with static, but the universal translator was able to make sense of it. The voice belonged to a Villani elder speaking for all the survivors. Thank you, the alien voice said simply. We thought we would die alone and forgotten. Thank you for hearing our call. Thank you for coming so far to help strangers. Admiral Jang stood among the wreckage of his fleet, looking down at the 3 damaged worlds. His ships had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Devourers had other fleets, other harvest operations across the galaxy, but something had changed today. For the first time in centuries, the harvesters had been stopped. For the first time, a species had answered the call for help. The galaxy would never be the same. Dr. Kang Seoin had never attempted anything like atmospheric restoration before, but she was not about to let the Villani die after humanity had fought so hard to save them. The 3 Villani worlds were still dying from the poison that the Devourers had pumped into their air, and every hour that passed meant more innocent lives were lost. Working with engineering chief Lim Jae-in, she converted several cargo ships into mobile atmospheric processors. The work was dangerous because the poison the Devourers had used was designed to break down organic matter at the molecular level. Several human volunteers died just trying to get close enough to study the deadly chemicals. Dr. Kang refused to give up. Every hour we wait, more Villani children die, she told Fleet Admiral Jang as she worked frantically in her makeshift laboratory. We did not come this far across the galaxy to watch them suffocate on their own air. We can fix this. We have to fix this. The poison was unlike anything in human medical databases. It seemed to be alive, somehow adapting and changing whenever the human scientists found a way to neutralize it. Dr. Kang worked for 72 hours straight without sleep, testing one solution after another, while Villani families huddled in underground shelters waiting for clean air. Lieutenant Commander No Jae-won suggested using the same technology that terraforming ships used to create atmospheres on dead worlds. But Dr. Kang shook her head. The terraforming process takes years, she explained. We need something that works in days or weeks, not decades. Finally, she found the answer in an old Earth textbook about ocean chemistry. The poison worked by creating acid chains that destroyed organic molecules, but certain types of algae from Earth's oceans could actually eat those acid chains and convert them back into harmless gases. The problem was that Earth algae could not survive in the Villani atmosphere. Dr. Kang had to genetically modify the algae using techniques that had never been tested before. It was risky science that could have made the situation worse, but she had no choice. While the medical teams worked on the atmosphere, Marine Colonel On Min-jae led rescue operations on the planet's surface. His troops found Villani camps scattered across all 3 worlds, filled with families who had been separated during the harvest. The Devourers had divided them by age and gender, preparing them for transport to the harvest ships. The first Villani that Corporal Jung Minji encountered was a young female clutching 2 small children. The alien's large eyes were filled with tears, and her soft fur was matted with dirt and fear. But when she saw the human soldiers, something changed in her expression. Hope replaced despair. Please, she whispered in broken universal standard that she had learned from intercepted human broadcasts. My mate, the harvesters, took him 3 days ago. Please help me find him. Colonel On looked at his Marines. They were exhausted from the battle. Their equipment was failing, and they had no idea where to even begin searching. The Devourers had scattered Villani prisoners across thousands of square kilometers, but he saw the same determination in his soldiers' faces that had driven them Across 12 light years of space we will find him, he promised the Villani mother. We will not stop looking until every family is together again. The rescue operations took 3 weeks. Human soldiers searched every abandoned facility, every hidden bunker, every place the devourers might have stashed prisoners. The work was heartbreaking because many of the places they searched contained only bodies, but they also found thousands of Villani who were still alive. Sergeant Park Hyun-soo found a group of 50 Villani children hiding in a school basement. They had been there for 2 weeks, surviving on emergency rations and rainwater. The oldest child was barely 10 years old in Villani terms, but she had kept the younger ones calm and organized. Where are our parents? She asked Sergeant Park in perfect universal standard. The older children had been learning human languages in school. Before the attack came, Sergeant Park knelt down to the child's level. We are looking for them, he said gently, and we will keep looking until we find them. You are safe now. We will take care of you. Commander No J1 of the medical ship Mercy set up field hospitals on all 3 worlds. His staff worked around the clock, treating everything from poison exposure to psychological trauma. Many Villani had never seen aliens before, but they quickly learned to trust the strange creatures who had traveled across the stars to help them. The Villani traditional greeting was a gentle touch of foreheads when Dr. Lee McYoung treated a wounded Villani elder. The old alien touched his forehead to hers and spoke in his native language. The universal translator rendered his words as, "You have good spirits, human doctor. Your people have souls that shine like stars." That greeting began to spread throughout the recovery camps. Human doctors and Villani patients would touch foreheads as a sign of respect and friendship. Human soldiers and Villani children played simple games together using gestures when words failed. The 2 species were learning to communicate in ways that went beyond language. Dr. Kong Seoyeon finally succeeded in cleaning the atmosphere on the 4th week. Her modified algae spread through the air like invisible healers, consuming the devourer poison and replacing it with clean, breathable gases. The first test came when she removed her breathing mask in one of the treatment zones. The air smelled sweet like flowers after rain instead of the acid burn that had filled the planets for weeks. She called Fleet Admiral Jang on her communicator. "Sir, we did it. The air is clean on Villani Prime. We can start removing the atmospheric processors slowly." Miraculously, the Villani worlds began to heal. The orange and red colors of poison and fire faded from the skies, replaced by the natural blues and greens that had existed before the harvest began. Plants that had been dying started to grow again. Animals that had hidden underground emerged to find fresh air waiting for them. Families separated by the devourers were reunited in emotional scenes that brought tears to the eyes of hardened human soldiers. Captain Kim Bong-soo of the rescue team found the mate of the first Villani mother they had encountered. He had been imprisoned in a facility 200 kilometers away, but he was alive and unharmed when the Villani female saw her mate running toward her across the camp. She made a sound that the universal translator could not render into words. It was pure joy, the sound of a heart that had given up hope suddenly filled with light again. The family embraced, while human soldiers watched with smiles on their faces. But even as they celebrated their success, Fleet Admiral Jang knew this was only the beginning. The devourers had harvest fleets throughout this part of the galaxy, attacking other species that might not have anyone to call for help somewhere. Out there, other voices were crying across the stars, begging for deliverance. The Villani Elder Council met with Admiral Jang in a ceremony held under the open sky. Now that the air was clean again, the eldest Villani, a female named Moon Whisper, spoke for all her people. "We do not have words in our language for what you have done," she said through the translator. "You came from the darkness between stars when we called for help. You fought monsters to save strangers. You healed our worlds when they were dying. We will remember this always." Admiral Jang looked around at the crowd of Villani and human faces mixed together in the afternoon sunlight. Children of both species were playing nearby, their laughter carrying on the clean wind. Elder Moon Whisper, "We helped because it was the right thing to do. We hope someday, if humanity needs help, there will be someone out there willing to do the same for us." The Villani Elder smiled, an expression that needed no translation. "We will be there," she promised. "When humanity calls across the stars, the Villani will answer. You have given us our lives back. Now your enemies are our Enemies your friends are our friends. As the human fleet prepared to leave the Villani system, Admiral Jang received a message from Earth Command. Devourer attacks had been reported in 4 other star systems. Species were calling for help, and Earth wanted to know if the human fleet was ready to respond. Admiral Jang looked out at his damaged ships and exhausted crews. They had lost nearly half their vessels and thousands of good people, but they had also proven something important when innocent. Voices cried out in the darkness. Someone would answer. He opened a communication channel to all his remaining ships. "This is Admiral Jang," he announced. "We have new orders. There are other species under attack, other harvests in progress." The question is, "Are you ready to do this again?" The response came from every ship at once, a chorus of voices from captains and crews who had seen what the Devourers did to innocent people. "Yes, sir," they said. "We are ready." The age of human intervention in Galactic affairs had begun. 6 months after the Battle of Villani Prime, humanity's response to the Devourer crisis had grown into something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. The Terran Rescue Fleet, commanded by Admiral Song Jinhee, patrolled the Outer Rim sectors. Like guardian angels hunting for harvest operations and liberating any species they found under attack, the news of humanity's intervention had spread across the galaxy through quantum communication networks that connected thousands of different world. Species that had survived Devourer attacks began to come forward, offering information and assistance. The war against the Harvesters was no longer humanity's fight alone. The Zephyrians were a bird-like species that had lost 3 colonies to the Devourers, but had managed to escape with detailed star charts showing harvest fleet movement patterns. They offered these charts to Admiral Song along with the services of their fastest scout ships. The architects were beings made of living crystal who communicated through light patterns. They had developed defensive technologies that could protect planets from the atmospheric poisoning weapons that the Devourers used. Their shields had saved 2 worlds from becoming uninhabitable wastelands. The deep swimmers were an aquatic species whose ships could travel through both space and the oceans of water worlds. They offered their vessels as mobile hospitals and rescue ships, since their technology was perfectly suited for saving populations from dying planets. Captain Ru Sung-min of the battlecruiser Defiant Hope found himself commanding the strangest fleet in galactic history. Human warships flew alongside alien vessels of every conceivable design. Some looked like giant flowers made of metal, others resembled schools of mechanical fish, still others were geometric shapes that seemed to bend space around them. The diversity was amazing, but what impressed Captain Ru most was how well the different species worked together. The Zephyrian scouts would locate Devourer fleets. The human warships would engage the harvest vessels in direct combat. The architect shields would protect any planets under attack, while the deep swimmer hospital ships evacuated the survivors. During the liberation of the Crystal World, Harmony Prime, Captain Ru watched a human Marine named Corporal Im Soya work alongside a Zephyrian soldier to rescue civilians from a collapsed building. The 2 beings could not speak each other's languages, but they communicated perfectly through gestures and shared purpose. The Devourers, for their part, were beginning to understand what they faced. This was not just another primitive species that could be harvested and forgotten. Humanity had done something that no other race in their long history had ever managed. They had united different species against a common enemy. Intelligence reports intercepted by Major Jung Kyu-hung revealed that the Devourers were calling their scattered fleets back to their core territories. They were planning something big, a massive offensive that would crush the growing alliance once and for all. The target was obvious: Earth itself. If they could destroy humanity's homeworld, they could break the spirit of the resistance and return to harvesting species one by one without interference. The final battle of the Harvest War began when 10,000 Devourer ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. The Harvest Fleet was led by their supreme commander, a creature so ancient that it had personally overseen the destruction of hundreds of civilizations over the millennia, but waiting for them was the largest allied fleet in galactic history. Over 5,000 ships from 27 different species had gathered to defend Earth. Humans, Villani Zephyrians, architects, deep swimmers, and dozens of other races stood together in the most diverse military force ever assembled. Admiral O'Mignon commanded the combined fleet from the bridge of the super battleship Terra Invicta, a massive,